Hi, and welcome to VENÜ Magazine's Design Talks. I am Jeffrey Maynard, VENÜ Magazine's correspondent for the day and principal at Maynard Design and Interiors in Newport Beach. We are here today with one of the most forward-thinking architects of our time, Edwin Chan, the founder and creative director of EC3 here in Los Angeles. Thank you for welcoming us to your studio.
Thanks for coming. Very excited about this.
So for those of you that aren't as familiar with Edwin's background, I wanted to just bring up your time with Frank Gehry & Associates, where you were design partner, I believe, for 25 years, if I'm not
Correct.
mistaken.
Believe it or not. Yeah, time flies.
Yeah, time does fly.
Right.
Can you share with us what some of those times were like and some of the influential projects you got to work on and kind of how that's translated into your practice today?
Well, when I graduated from architecture school at Harvard, I decided to work for Frank for a number of different reasons. Number one is I wanted to be in LA because I didn't want to be in the East Coast. And what attracted me about LA is this connection to nature and its openness. And I felt like it was a better place for me to develop myself as an architect, as a creative person. And I wanted to work for Frank because at that time he wasn't the famous star architect the way that he is now, but I was very drawn to his relationship with the Los Angeles artists. And that was an important reason for me to pursue architecture, is the connection between architecture and the arts. And I thought that I could learn a lot from Frank in terms of developing that kind of relationship. So I applied and I was very lucky that I got my job. And of course, when I was at Frank's office, I think that I was very fortunate to have worked on a lot of the arts projects. Of course, the most famous one being the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao. And my last project there was the Foundation Louis Vuitton in Paris, but there were also a lot of sort of collaboration with artists and other kinds of art museums in between. A lot of people think about Frank's work as this kind of very sculptural, kind of iconic approach to architecture. And I think for me, though, the most important or most valuable lesson is not so much the sculptural part, although, obviously I've sort of been there, done that. I think that I've learned how to use my eyes and how to trust myself intuitively. That's an important thing that sometimes we tend to forget, that architecture, it's about making experience for people. And the intuitive part of the decision making is one of the most valuable lessons that I've learned from Frank. And the other part the other lesson, which I thought was also valuable, I hope that I can bring to my current practice, is the idea of collaboration. In the sense that most people, again, think of Frank as this kind of figure and he just does that and people just follow, but he's actually a very collaborative architect. And the client and the consultant team is a very important part of the creative process, and I've really learned a lot from that experience. And I think that's one of the things that I've sort of hoped that I could translate in my own practice, is this concept of how you develop a design through this collaborative process.
That is exactly where I was going to go, is into your collaboration, because it feels like it is very multidisciplinary in that regards. And it does seem like, since and maybe this was during your time with Frank as well, but it seems like it has opened doors to other types of projects, not just buildings and structures. And do you mind kind of touching on what some of those projects have been since you've had your own practice? Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's the reason why I call my practice EC3 is not my initials. Most people think that it's my initial, but it's not. It's really about empowering the kind of cross-disciplinary collaboration. And this is one thing that I thought it's definitely an area that I wanted to explore in my own practice, is collaborating obviously with clients, but also with artists and engineers and also creative people and thinkers of the other disciplines. So, and we've been fortunate enough to kind of work on projects that kind of hopefully covers a range of things, and will continue to evolve it and broaden the scope. Like, you know, I work frequently with an artist, Italian-American artist. His name is Piero Golia.
Okay.
And we've created what we call like the Chalet project, which is an immersive kind of 21st century salon for the art world in Los Angeles and in Dallas. I also collaborate, you know, with, for example, the climate engineer Transola in Munich, that we developed this concept for the tower in Sydney. So with every project, it's a collaboration. And also we do other things from like set designs, like we created a set design for a new retelling of the Frankenstein story. Low budget, but it's interesting. And now and we've also created a dog sculpture. So we do things from very small scale to obviously master planning, urban design, as well as buildings in a much more conventional way. So it's across very different kinds of discipline of collaborations. And that's what we like to do. And I think an important part of the collaborative process is that it opens up doors, and I never kind of go into a project with, hey, this is what we're gonna do. And it's more like an exploration. And often I use this metaphor, like 1 + 1 when you collaborate should be 3 or more.
I'm assuming that's where the 3 comes from.
Yeah, right. So it takes us in a direction that we typically wouldn't do ourselves.
Right.
And I think that's what's exciting is this process of discovery.
That is, I think, something that's very eye-opening and beautiful for this industry as well, because I think collaboration is such a kind of gray area when it comes to design and architecture, and in doing so, it sounds like most of your projects kind of have this very organic flow in development. And just from looking around your studio here, I mean, it seems that a lot of these projects evolve over time with the process of building models, and I'm assuming that is for visual aids for not just yourselves, but for the team members from the other disciplines. Is that something that you typically rely on for most of your projects to understand scale, dynamics? What is...
Yeah, well, I mean, the model making is a little bit of a dinosaur art right now, right? So most people are just going straight to the digital domain. We understand that. But for us, it's a kind of sketching in 3 dimensions.
Right.
And it's also engaging for our clients and our other creative teams, so that they could also be a part of it. Right. And there is a little bit of like playing too, because it's almost like a kid playing with these kind of like building blocks. And it's very primal, but at the same time it's very it's inviting. And we often invite our clients or other creative team members to be a part of that. And then after the whole process, they also own the design.
Right.
And so we don't have this kind of ego, say, hey, this is our design. And by doing that, you're basically opening the door to everybody involved, and they can all contribute to it. In terms of the physical model, it's interesting. Like, long time ago, I was working, well, in fact, like, as you know, we work with a lot of tech companies at the moment. And incidentally, they all enjoy playing with us on the physical model, because clearly, you would think that with the technology companies, they would be drawn to the digital arts, tools. But the truth is, because that's what they do for all day long, they actually like using their hands and playing with us in a sort of most analog way. I think it's probably a way for them to get in touch with their humanity too. Right. So it's interesting from that point of view. That is.
I was going to ask how that kind of differs from the use of technology and all of the tools today. And I know earlier we're speaking about kind of the analog versus even getting into the virtual reality of pieces, and I'm assuming as that evolves, that may end up playing a larger role in the development of some of your future projects?
Well, yeah, I think the physical model part will still be an important tool for us in terms of sort of searching for an architectural solution. But lately, we have started to explore the virtual reality thing, because that's the other way that you could kind of immerse yourself in the space. I think the technology is still in a sort of very early stage of development, but in the technological world, things happen very quickly. So hopefully in a few years, the platform could evolve so that it has a much more user-friendly kind of interface. Okay. But it is an interesting tool for us and for the clients and for people involved. I think the challenge is really about the intuitive aspect of it. Going back to my point earlier, is how you can develop a tool that everybody could use in a very intuitive way.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And then in doing so, obviously, your physical models are a great representation of what is to come. And then in the development of the actual spaces, whether it's the interiors or exteriors, how important are these models in your thought process of kind of that tactile experience or the play of light, whether it's artificial or natural? Is that a large role, obviously, in the models or your overall view when you're developing, I would assume?
Well, yeah, I think materiality it's the other thing that is a very important aspect in terms of my practice, and definitely I'm very sensitive to natural light and how the lighting, whether it's artificial or natural, could play a role in bringing the space alive, because light is a free material, actually. I consider that as part of the materiality of a space, and when the space is well lit, meaning it's oriented in a way that is very interesting, that engages people, it changes the experience significantly. So it's very, very important for me. The material is the thing. Like a lot of times when architects, a lot of my peers, when they talk about material, they're talking about material in a sort of very precious way, and that's not really how I think about materials. Okay. Meaning, like, it's not about stone versus some very smooth polished concrete or the type of materiality that most architects like to talk about. I mean, I like the idea of very common materials, like whatever we have around us.
Is that something that's also dependent on the location of where you're building as well, or is that just something that is?
Well, I mean, we've worked on projects in different places, in Europe, in Asia, and I think definitely depends on the geography. They have a certain way of making buildings that is interesting to kind of learn from and take advantage of. But what I'm talking about is that the trick is about, for me, is about how you can transform common materials into something that is special. Often, I was referring to, like, for example, the way Picasso might transform a bicycle wheel into a sculpture. Or Duchamp, the famous fountain, where he just made a urinal into a sculpture. So I think for me, that's more interesting way to think about material. It's not so much about, let me just go get the most expensive marble and put it on the kitchen, and make it look so precious. But it's around how you can use common material in an interesting way that makes it transform it into a work of art. So I think that's the trick.
Okay, that's incredible. I mean, from what you're creating in kind of this physical immersion of space, we actually have a couple of guests that come from the digitally immersive space.
So they are sort of 3D.
No, we will not have. We will have a discussion. So let me give a quick introduction, and then I'll let you guys both kind of divulge into your backgrounds. We have Jessica Santiago, the founder of ArtRepublic.
Hi.
And we also have John and I'm totally going to mess up your last name, so I'm not even going to say it. But they both are in the world of digital art and architecture and that kind of immersion.
Hi, Jessica. Hi, John.
Jessica, if you can kind of give a background of what your company does and how that interacts with kind of the human element, and then John, if you don't mind chiming in afterwards.
Okay, so ArtRepublic is a curation agency. We specialize in working with digital artists that build immersive environments, specifically artists that are focused on the merging of art and technology for wellness. So most of the digital artists that we work with, like Jean, are looking at human perception, we're looking at psychology, some art history concepts. They're diving into composition in a very different way than a traditional digital or even crypto artist. And we design spaces that end up bringing a state of coherence, creating a state of meditation. We'll often pair them with sound frequencies, philosophical audios. We partner with Alan Watts Foundation a good bit. But that is really our focus, is to be able to help induce a state of coherence in our work.
And then, John, sorry, do you mind kind of giving your perspective and your background? I know it's late for you over there.
No, it's good. It's good. Yeah. I got my coffee.
Hi, John.
Second coffee. So
Nice to meet you.
So thanks for your invitation. Yeah, I am a visual artist. I work with different kinds of immersive media. My practice is an exploration of these different immersive technologies to create this new experiences, bridging the digital and the physical. So this sometimes can be using projection mapping, large displays, using VR headsets, AR tools, digital fabrication like 3D printing and laser cutting and those kind of stuff. So all my work is about bridging that connection and bringing something physical to the virtual, or taking something virtual, bringing it to physical via these technologies to create this new hybrid future realities. And I have a background in visual communication design and physics. And I did my master's in art and technology. So science, art, and design, it all informs, my research and what I do.
Sounds very exciting.
Do you see, Edwin, do you see kind of a bridge to both of these mediums where you kind of come from more, we'll say, background is more tactile and analog, but is more about the space and the dimension and the light, where they're more about creating that ambiance within, I would say, maybe more two-dimensional planes within a space, but still giving that three-dimensional aspect, and obviously you're bringing in the other sound aspect of it as well. Do you see this as something that will bridge in the future with maybe what you create and with what you both, Jessica and John, are able to develop as well?
No, I from my perspective, I think I also know in LA there are artists who are sort of exploring those kind of things as well. I think that seems to be definitely, as I said, on the horizon. Now, personally, I haven't had the opportunity to collaborate with an artist such as John or any of these kind of emerging sort of, how do you say, virtual, digital artists. But it's definitely on my horizon in terms of as a frontier of how you create this kind of experience. So I hope that one day I could maybe collaborate with John on a project together, and I think that would be an interesting thing to do, for sure. I think the immersive thing is an interesting, ultimately has to do, like a lot of friends of mine or curators that I know or artists, when you do like a digital space or immersive space, like typically it happens in the black box, so to speak, because that's the kind of the background is like a sound stage, a black box, and within that you can create stuff. I think the question is not so much what you do with this, because I mean, the people who create content kind of create that kind of thing,
Right.
is what is the architectural potential for that?
For the
And
integration of the
exactly, I
technology.
think that is the question that we are all trying to explore.
Right.
And I would say that probably, and in my own kind of naive way maybe, that as much as the immersive digital part is important, I think that makes the tactile experience that complements that even more so important.
Right.
So because I think it's not like, you know, it's sort of like, you know, when you watch Star Trek, you kind of say the ultimate goal is to create this kind of holodeck thing that you walk in and you're in a different world. So that would be a fantasy that we all have.
Right.
That is that somehow, you know, you can create this holodeck. You walk in, it's the whole other world. But then the question is, what is the container for that?
Right.
And what is the interface between that and the humanity is the question that
Right.
we're all trying to answer.
Right.
And that would be the opportunity for the collaboration, is how you create this environment that is completely virtual or kind of this world, this other world, and still give it a kind of tactility.
Right.
And I don't know the answer, to be honest, but I love to explore that with, you know, an artist like John or other artists who are involved in the new media, because I think that would be the holy grail.
It would be, I agree.
Yeah.
I think that is kind of the next step in the development of the technology into the kind of the physical world of what's being created. Jessica, I believe you had said that you focused, or ArtRepublic focused a lot on the health and mindfulness as well with the digital arts, and is that something that is being integrated into really more kind of functional spaces, or is it again kind of how Edwin was explaining, into this kind of black box scenario? Does that make sense?
We definitely are doing it in physical spaces. What's really interesting is there's two categories that I think are adopting it quickest. One is in corporate environments for mental health for their employees. So building immersive wellness rooms, meditation rooms, where people can go, be able to take a break. That is really interesting. And then also public permanent digital installations. We're talking to a handful for within airports, because that way we can, again, create this state of coherence in these environments that can often be quite stressful.
Like in the Dubai airport and some of those places, you have these kind of wellness rooms,
Right.
especially in this huge, like in Singapore, for example, all these places.
Right.
Yeah, I know all that. And obviously the tech companies, they're into that for sure. We know that they're into providing this kind of wellness environment for their employees. Well, at least in the days when they had to go to work.
Yeah. Yep. We've even been approached by some different large chain brands. The place on the way to the destination. So, for instance, something like a Starbucks that you would stop by on your way to work. Now they have to become the destination. So they're looking at how do we change over the next 5 to 10 years this concept and make it even more appealing for people to be the destination. So we've proposed working on a pilot with them on doing these coherent installations for a permanent large-scale digital wall that has the sound frequencies, the visuals, these calming meditative artworks and experiences built into them. Another interesting part too is the live data that we can get within these through AI sensors. So we can sense the tonality of a room, the biometrics of the room, facial expressions, all even with privacy, so we can see what the read of the room is without knowing who exactly is making the giving us the data. But that way then the installations can become interactive. So if we want to make the environment higher energy, the installation can change in color palettes, change in the motion, change in sound frequencies according to the feedback that it's receiving from the room.
Well, it sounds like I need to go to one of these. I'm ready to because our day-to-day work, I'm always looking for a good way to achieve wellness. So I'm a big believer in that. Well, I think especially in the context of the lockdown, and at least one thing in the most sort of intuitive way that I felt like is that it's definitely made me extremely aware the importance of being close to nature and how that can bring to our physical wellness, right? For sure. And so I think in the context of biophilia, what Cam is talking about, like it's a coincidence, perhaps. Like I'm thinking about my own personal living environment. Right. I want to incorporate more sort of plants and nature, and you really appreciate that a lot more now. Agreed. Than say 2 years ago. 100%. And in terms of the design, in terms workplace and as well as living, I'm definitely feeling just from talking to different people and making observations and in terms of our own even projects, that everybody's looking for this reconnection with nature, with the environment. Definitely this has become a very urgent issue for us now, more so than 2 years ago.
Yes, I think
and having environments that are sort of more naturally ventilated and much more working with the environment and make you appreciate just the beauty of just something as simple as the light.
Just daylight.
Yeah, daylight and views. It's just something that is almost so basic that we tend to forget.
Right.
And that's the first step towards creating this kind of more sustainable future for us. I mean, obviously, you can get into more scientific, analytical, engineering, technological way, but it starts with the first step is to bring all of us better connected with nature by just taking a deep breath, the air, and looking outside the window, opening the window, see green, and bring the green indoor. And these are very simple things, but there's sometimes it's so important that we forgot.
You know, for me, one of the things, and I'm still, doing a lot of research on it, but I recently watched a documentary called This Machine Greens, and it breaks down, and one of the best ways I've heard yet, a really interesting perspective on blockchain and the NFTs, the energy consumption. And it actually shows how over time, by making things so dramatically more efficient, and the fact that the miners are actually seeking sources of energy that are currently being wasted, it shows that over time it could actually be incredibly beneficial. So that's something I would definitely recommend to check out. I just watched it one time and it was a lot of information to take in, but I'm definitely going to be watching it again and really putting some more time into studying it. But it was a very exciting perspective that I haven't heard talked about yet.
From my perspective, what I'm trying to be cautious about when I'm using these new, technologies and immersive media is what I understood over the time, with my experiments with domes and VR and, large-scale installations. These are really powerful sensory tools, so we gotta be careful how to use this power, how to harness this power, because it's not the same thing as designing something for your small, phone screen or your computer screen, but we create worlds, we invite people into these worlds, and it has a strong effect, on our consciousness and, in our conscious state, in our inner states. So what I'm trying to do is just trying to bring that wellness angle as we speak, like how to reduce stress, how to use certain type of visuals to calm people's mind. Because what I see from a lot of the digital artists that doesn't really understand how this new, immersive media works, there's a lot of emphasis on the shock value and, like strong strobe lights, or, sometimes like certain aesthetics can be, expressing your craziness can be therapeutic for you, for yourself, for your own healing. But a lot of people are putting out there a lot of like not mentally well images and sounds. So I think it's polluting the metaverse. And hopefully, if we understand the power on the psychology and bringing the inspiration from the nature, not just as creating green and blue images and leaves and stuff, but really understanding what happens when we're in nature, how our inner spaces are reacting to this original setting, and then we can understand that and we can bring more of that into this new digital spaces we're building.
Honestly, I think that coming from, maybe Edwin's point of view and my point of view as well, in the physical design side of it, is a lot of it is also just kind of getting back to basics, and I think it's very twofold as far as the direction that I can go. And I think that Edwin started to touch on it briefly. It's just as simple as having access to natural light and to fresh air, and yet I know not everybody has that access as well. And I think it's really going to be a bit of a split feeling for a lot. I think there's going to be a good amount of people that just want to go back to having just very simple lives, and others that will rely on this to help with kind of that stress and anxiety of life. And I'm sure part of that will be dependent on where they're located, whether it's in a metropolitan area or if they have more access to nature. And I think the evolution of integrating this kind of digital realm and technology into, whether it's buildings, whether it's public spaces, whether it's to event spaces, I think finding that balance is going to be kind of the challenge and excitement of kind of what's to come, and it's exciting to see.
One thing that, as we were talking about it, one thing that came to my mind was space travel. And it is something that I've always been very interested in, is space travel. In fact, like my graduate architecture thesis was to design a space station. Let's just say we start to colonize space. I think that would be super interesting to see how the wellness stuff, and because over there, right, you're not going to have the access to what we're used to here. And that would become really, really relevant and really, really important to see how these technology might relate to space travel and space colonization. Actually, that would be, I would be the first to sign up for it, in fact. That would be very exciting. Now you just got me excited. We're going to go to Mars today. No, this is a very important topic, actually, for that. You're thinking about how you create an environment, basically, an alternative universe for us to inhabit. And where else could it be a better place to inhabit it than actually in space? Exactly. Because that is when you really need it and when you really miss it.
Correct. I mean, I think that's getting back to very early on. It was kind of, you're putting that into that black box scenario, although it may be on Mars, but it may be in space.
But it lends itself to it. It has the need.
Correct. Exactly.
And imagine if I could be, if I were one of the space colonists or somebody, like pioneers, and you have this access of wellness that we miss. That would be when you really need it. Actually.
And I think I'm assuming, John and Jessica both, that you are at the point where there is actually physical interaction with some of these installations and what you're creating as well.
For sure. One of the things, for instance, in my master's thesis, I focused on was bringing more physical elements and physical interaction into the VR experiences, because I realized, there is sound, there are visuals, but the tactile sense is definitely missing. And when you're in that virtual space, through the headsets, if you have a certain physical input, like the objects that you can interact in the physical space, both in physical space and virtual space, there is a whole new, realm of interaction is opening. But for me, I see all these technologies as the stepping stones to the ultimate virtual space we're heading towards, kind of like the Matrix. If and when the brain-computer interface happens for real, and computer scientists and neuroscientists really understands how the cognition works and how brain, processes the information. So if we can connect our computer systems into our brains directly, then we don't need these glasses or other stuff. We can render these virtual worlds directly in our own organic rendering engine, So that's the future that I'm excited about, and I see all these experimentation with these new hardwares as just a stepping stone toward that ultimate.
So John, what do you think about what I said about sort of like the application in terms of space travel?
I think we're built for that. Like there are some theories, saying that we actually have the blueprints, for getting us ready for zero gravity environment. So we can, from a certain point of view, we can see that this is not just an invention, but it's like an activation in our own thinking. Because the logical step for scientists, for philosophers, seems like colonizing the space for our ultimate survival. So, and if we do that, it will require us to leave our home planet and everything it provides, and we will need to reconstruct all that we need,
Exactly.
with the technologies.
Yeah, so that's why I was excited about that too. I mean, that was the first thing that came to my mind as you were talking about your ideas and so on. And I also think that's possibly the next frontier for architecture. And I think that is what I see missing, perhaps, is that when you go to NASA, all these people, they think of space travel as engineering.
Right.
But then I think it's the art that is going to make that livable for us people. Right. And it's some of these ideas that were just floating out there that is going to transform that whole experience into something else.
Right.
Than just a bunch of guys in the suit and just going up on a rocket.
Yeah, that's perfectly well put, because like you said, we don't want to just survive, right? We want to have a living.
And that is a question of how you make it into a real experience as opposed to just, that. Well, I mean, I think in America, a lot of people, at least in the construction industry, people always confuse, you make a building LEED certified or LEED gold or whatever, these different things, then you're sustainable.
Right.
And I think from my perspective, we think about it slightly differently. I'm not saying that LEED is important or not important.
Right.
But I think in the end, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which was about getting us back more in touch with the environment. And it starts with something really basic like that.
Right.
And what constitutes a comfortable environment for us as humans. And obviously, COVID has sort of magnified this need. And going back to what Can was talking about, like the biophilia, connection with nature. Right. And for example, the project that we talked about, the Sydney project,
right,
is an office building for a technology company. And we started the project working with our friend at Transola. We asked a simple question. If you look at all the office buildings around the world, from office buildings in the US to Asia to the Middle East, Europe, maybe Central America, in different kinds of climate zones, inevitably all the office buildings look alike.
Right.
In the sense, not stylistically, but there are these kind of enclosed glass boxes.
Right.
because that is the default architecture of high-rise office buildings. So whether the building is in New York, in LA, in China, in Russia, in India, they're all enclosed glass boxes. And that is environmentally not sustainable. And what we're trying to do, or the question that we ask is, let's just say in the context of Sydney, it has a very specific environment. It's one of the most beautiful cities in the world. It has a very temperate climate. So why wouldn't you design an office building that you can open the windows and let the air flow and let the people enjoy biophilia? So it's very simple questions, common sense things, before you get into the engineering and all that other stuff. And if you could create an office building that is unique to each climate zone, that allows people to be more in touch with nature, to the environment, then you're halfway there. Then you can, the engineering and everything else follows. So for that project, we're making our design, the concept is, why don't we use natural ventilation as much as possible to create the work environment? And that was before COVID. Now, of course, COVID has made everybody realize that is such an important thing. And everybody wants to be able to work in an environment that you could open the door, open the window, breathe the fresh air, and how important that is. And the other thing is, imagine, like a few years ago, I was in Dubai, for example. It's in the middle of a desert, and they talk about sustainable, but we're in this huge hotel, and the whole thing is a refrigerator. So imagine the energy consumption that you would need to air condition a huge hotel in Dubai when it's 120 degrees out there. So you can talk about sustainable however you want it. That is not sustainable. And if you're on the opposite end, if you're in a sort of temperate climate in, say, in India, in Singapore, how can you make that a comfortable environment for people without having to rely on air conditioning? So these are very simple things.
Simple, but that is the new challenge, or the next.
That would be what people should be focusing on is, before you talk about all the other window dressing, simple things. That's common sense.
Common sense, exactly. That's incredible.
And the other thing that I think is very important for architecture, at least for me, my personal value, is the amount of waste in construction industry. In American society, just in terms of food, resources, it's a huge amount of waste. And in the past, we just kind of take it for granted because presumably we were able to take it for granted, but I don't think that is the case anymore. So I think for us to sort of try to imagine a way of making buildings, making our physical environment or living without wasting all the resources, that's a big challenge. Again, it asks for a simple change of our lifestyle. We have to not take things for granted. We have to appreciate things, and we have to learn how to recycle or reuse things and completely minimize our waste. And see, these are very simple things. It's not about all the science and stuff, but it asks for us to change our value system. And that is the ultimate challenge, I think. It is.
I think that's basically a very societal question and conversation that needs to be had. And there are certain societies that are very homogenous and others that aren't.
Simple questions.
It is. There are always simple answers at the end of it. It's just how do we get everyone to get there?
Exactly.
Yeah. What does the future hold for EC3?
Well, I think we just kind of keep doing whatever we're doing. And I think you have to be truthful to yourself. And we talked a lot about the values already. So you just kind of have to follow and stay with it.
Congratulations on everything. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I know myself, I'm sure everyone listening, team at VENÜ, everyone is very appreciative of your inspiring words and your approach to architectural design. And Thank you. Thank you again.
Well, thanks for having me.